What if I told you that your body cannot store fat unless it builds new blood vessels first? That means fat gain isn't just about calories. It's not just about insulin. And it's definitely not just about willpower. Fat is dependent on blood flow. No blood vessels, no fat expansion. And once you understand this, weight loss starts to look very different. I'm Dr. Angio, and today I want to talk about something that fundamentally changes how we think about fat storage and fat loss. The critical role of angiogenesis, the growth of blood vessels, in determining whether your body stores fat or burns it. Most people think of fat tissue as inert storage, just extra calories sitting under the skin. But fat tissue, known as adipose tissue, behaves like an organ. It is one of the most metabolically active organs in your body, and it requires an extensive blood vessel network to survive. In fact, every single fat cell must be within about 100 micrometers of a blood vessel. If it isn't, that cell becomes starved of oxygen and nutrients and cannot survive. That single fact tells us something very important. Fat tissue cannot expand unless new blood vessels grow first. This process, called angiogenesis, is the formation of new capillaries from existing blood vessels. Without angiogenesis, fat cells cannot receive oxygen, nutrients, or hormonal signals. They cannot store additional fat, and they cannot efficiently release fatty acids into the bloodstream when energy is needed. Today, we're going to walk through how this works, why it matters, and how understanding angiogenesis gives us a completely different way of thinking about weight loss. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment. I post science-driven videos every week so you can understand what's really happening inside your body and use that knowledge to avoid some of medicine's most preventable illnesses. Now let's start with something important. Fat itself is not the enemy. Fat is one of the most powerful evolutionary tools humans have ever had. It helped our species survive famine, cold, and long periods without food. Fat storage is a survival mechanism. Every organ in your body depends on glucose for energy. Your brain, red blood cells, muscles, and vital organs all require glucose to function. When you eat, glucose can be burned immediately for energy, or it can be packaged away for later use. That packaging process involves specialized liver cells called hepatocytes and fat cells called adipocytes. When you eat more energy than you immediately need, excess glucose and fatty acids are converted into triglycerides. Those triglycerides are stored inside fat cells in structures called lipid droplets. This stored energy is meant to be used later during periods of starvation or intense energy demand. The entire system is regulated by hormones. After you eat, insulin rises and acts as a storage signal. It suppresses fat breakdown and promotes fat storage. During fasting or exercise, glucagon and stress hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline act as release signals. They activate enzymes that break triglycerides apart, releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. The liver plays a central role here. It takes in fatty acids and proteins and converts them into glucose through gluconeogenesis, supplying energy to tissues that depend on it. This system worked beautifully for most of human history. The problem is that modern life has removed the starvation phase. Calories are abundant, food is highly processed, and physical activity has dramatically declined. As a result, obesity rates in the United States have climbed from under 20% in 1990 to over 40% today, affecting more than 100 million adults. Alongside this, type 2 diabetes rates have risen sharply, and childhood obesity and diabetes have nearly doubled. Our biology hasn't changed, but our environment has. Here's where angiogenesis becomes central. When fat tissue expands, it requires new blood vessels. Fat cells release signaling molecules, especially vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF. VEGF acts like a distress signal, telling nearby blood vessels that more oxygen and nutrients are needed. Endothelial cells lining blood vessels respond by proliferating, migrating, and forming new capillary networks that penetrate the growing fat tissue. This creates a powerful feedback loop. More fat signals more blood vessel growth. More blood vessels allow more fat storage. That, in turn, signals even more angiogenesis. Animal studies show that blocking VEGF receptor 2, the primary receptor for angiogenic signaling, can reduce fat tissue expansion by up to 30%. That tells us fat growth is not just hormonally regulated, it is vascular dependent. But this story has another layer. When fat tissue expands faster than blood vessels can grow, parts of that tissue become hypoxic, meaning oxygen-starved. Hypoxia triggers inflammation, insulin resistance, and metabolic dysfunction. The fat tissue begins releasing inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha and IL-6, which worsen insulin resistance and increase cardiovascular risk. This is where fat tissue stops being protective and becomes pathogenic. Now, let's talk about something most people don't realize. Not all fat is the same. Your body has 3 distinct types of adipose tissue: white fat, brown fat, and beige fat. Each behaves very differently. White fat is the primary energy storage tissue. It stores calories efficiently for long-term use. Each white fat cell contains a large lipid droplet designed to pack away energy. Brown fat is completely different. It is designed to burn calories and generate heat. Brown fat cells are packed with mitochondria and contain a protein called UCP1. This protein uncouples energy production, allowing fuel to be burned without generating ATP. Instead, the energy is released as heat. This process is called non-shivering thermogenesis. Brown fat also has its own localized thyroid hormone activation system. When exposed to cold, brown fat converts inactive thyroid hormone into its active form directly within the tissue, dramatically increasing heat production even when overall thyroid levels are normal. This explains why people with low thyroid function often feel cold. Their internal furnace isn't working efficiently. Beige fat sits in between. These are white fat cells that can transform into brown-like cells under certain conditions, such as cold exposure or exercise. This process is called browning. The metabolic differences are dramatic. While white fat stores energy, activated brown fat burns energy. In rodents, brown fat can burn hundreds of calories per day. In humans, the total amount of brown fat is smaller, but when activated, it significantly increases glucose uptake and fatty acid oxidation. Now, let's talk about how fat is actually burned. Fat burning, or lipolysis, is a stepwise enzymatic process. Stored triglycerides are broken down by enzymes into free fatty acids and glycerol. These fatty acids enter the bloodstream, bind to albumin, and travel to tissues like muscle and liver, where they are burned in mitochondria to produce energy. You cannot spot reduce fat. Your body decides where fat is released based on hormones, receptor density, and genetics. Now here's where angiogenesis becomes a double-edged sword. This is what researchers call the angiogenesis paradox. In early, gradual weight gain, angiogenesis can be adaptive. Blood vessel growth keeps pace with fat expansion. Oxygen delivery is maintained, inflammation stays low, insulin sensitivity remains intact. In fact, experimental studies show that increasing VEGF signaling during early fat expansion can improve vascular density and even promote browning of white fat. These individuals may have higher body fat but remain metabolically healthy. This is sometimes referred to as metabolically healthy obesity. But in established obesity, the picture changes. Fat expands too quickly. Blood vessel growth cannot keep up. Hypoxia develops. Inflammatory signaling increases. Macrophages infiltrate the tissue. Fibrosis develops. Insulin resistance worsens. At this stage, angiogenesis becomes maladaptive. The new blood vessels are disorganized, leaky, and dysfunctional, similar to what we see in tumors. In this context, blocking angiogenesis improves metabolic outcomes in animal models. Inhibiting VEGF signaling reduces fat mass, improves insulin sensitivity, lowers inflammation, and increases thermogenesis. One compound studied extensively is TNP-470, originally developed as an anti-angiogenic cancer drug. In mice on high-fat diets, it reduced weight gain by up to 50%, improved cholesterol levels, and improved insulin sensitivity by selectively reducing pathological fat expansion. After weight loss, the body attempts to regain fat by increasing angiogenic signaling. When angiogenesis was blocked during this rebound phase, weight regain was prevented and browning of white fat increased. Now here's the critical caveat. These are animal studies. Angiogenesis is essential for wound healing, cardiovascular repair, and reproductive health. We do not block angiogenesis systemically in humans to treat obesity. But the insight is profound. Fat tissue is vascular dependent. Change the blood supply and you change the metabolic behavior of fat. So how do we translate this into practical, evidence-based fat loss? First, fat loss still requires a sustained caloric deficit. Energy intake must remain lower than energy expenditure. This forces adipocytes to release stored energy. A moderate deficit of 500 to 750 calories per day typically produces 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss per week. Extreme restriction backfires by increasing hunger hormones and lowering metabolic rate. Dietary pattern matters less than adherence. Mediterranean-style diets, lower carbohydrate approaches, higher protein plans, and structured meal replacements can all work if they are sustainable. Reducing ultra-processed foods and sugar-sweetened beverages consistently improves outcomes. Exercise adds a critical layer. Exercise improves insulin sensitivity, increases mitochondrial density, enhances fatty acid oxidation, and preserves lean mass. Resistance training is particularly important for maintaining metabolic rate. Brown fat activation through cold exposure or certain compounds increases energy expenditure modestly. But it is best viewed as supportive, not primary. Behavioral structure matters. Programs that include monitoring, accountability, and follow-up consistently produce 5 to 10% weight loss, which is enough to significantly improve metabolic health. Pharmacotherapy, including GLP-1 receptor agonists, has transformed obesity treatment by making sustained caloric deficit more tolerable. These medications reduce appetite and improve satiety without directly burning fat. Across all approaches, the same principle emerges. Effective fat loss alters the hormonal, inflammatory, and vascular environment of adipose tissue. Insulin exposure declines, lipolysis increases. Inflammation decreases. As fat cells shrink, the pathological drive for angiogenesis diminishes. Fat loss is not about fighting biology, it is about reshaping the internal environment so biology works with you. As we close, it's important to set realistic expectations. Weight loss typically slows after 6 to 12 months due to metabolic adaptation. This is not failure. It is biology attempting to prevent starvation. Health improvements do not require extreme weight loss. A 5% reduction in body weight significantly improves insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, and inflammation. 10 to 15% provides additional benefit when achieved safely. Body weight is influenced by genetics, medications, sleep, stress, environment, and access to food. This is not a moral issue. The future may include therapies that target adipose vasculature more precisely, but for now, the most effective strategy remains a combination of nutrition, movement, behavioral support, and, when appropriate, medication. Fat storage and fat loss are complex biological processes involving blood vessels, hormones, mitochondria, and the brain. Understanding that complexity frees us from simplistic narratives and allows us to focus on sustainable health. This is Dr. Angio. If you want deeper, evidence-based explanations of metabolism, angiogenesis, and the biology behind modern disease, make sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who wants to understand the why behind weight loss. I'll see you in the next one.